Europe has had it. An overwhelming number of the continent's population is rising up and demanding their respective governments deport as many migrants as possible. And no nation has taken up that cause of late more than Denmark. But you're not going to believe who is actually leading the war on migration and what it means for the future of Europe and Western civilization as a whole. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness. Breaking news and analysis you're not going to hear anywhere else, so make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. The scenes you're witnessing here are not from Islamabad or Cairo, but from Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. Mass Islamic prayer in the streets of Denmark's cities have been growing in both size and frequency of late, the fruit of Denmark's overwhelmingly liberal immigration policies. Now, Denmark was one of the first nations to sign the 1951 Refugee Convention, standing alongside countries like Australia and Belgium in committing to refugee protection. During the 60s and 70s, like many European nations rebuilding after World War II, Denmark actively recruited guest workers from Turkey and Pakistan to fill labor shortages. The expectation was rather simple. They would work, earn money, and then eventually return home. But many didn't. Instead, they stayed. They brought their families, and they grew exponentially. In 1980, immigrants made up just 2.6% of the population. By 2025 in Denmark, that number had risen to 12.6%, with another 3.7% made up of Danes born to immigrant parents. Nearly all of Denmark's population growth since 1980 has come from immigration. But this change didn't feel gradual to many people. Instead, it felt sudden and disruptive. The turning point came in 2015 during the European migration crisis. More than 1 million asylum seekers entered Europe that year, fleeing wars in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Denmark, a country of just 6 million, received over 21,000 asylum applications in that year alone, a six-fold increase from just 3,500 in 2012, which was, until then, the highest number in the country's history. Denmark wasn't prepared. The asylum system was absolutely overwhelmed. Small towns suddenly saw refugee centers appear almost overnight. By 2016, border controls were reinstated, refugee benefits were cut, and the government took an extraordinary step, placing advertisements in Lebanese newspapers announcing that welfare benefits for asylum seekers had been reduced by 50%. The message was blunt. Don't come here. You're not welcome. Now, for a country known for its welfare generosity and liberal openness, the sudden hostility raised an obvious question. Why did Denmark change so sharply? Well, the reality is that Denmark had been struggling with immigration for years. The difference was that these problems were rarely discussed openly in public. When the issue finally surfaced, the statistics were unsettling. Denmark accepted immigrants mainly from the Middle East, North Africa, and Somalia. Over time, immigration outcomes failed to meet expectations. Ethnic enclaves formed in Danish cities, neighborhoods where Danish was no longer the main language. Unemployment remained high, education levels were low, and crime became a growing concern. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Immigrants made up about 14% of Denmark's population, yet they accounted for over 30% of violent crime convictions, more than double their share of the population. According to Statistics Denmark's 2016 report, the crime rate of non-Western male migrants was about 3 times that of the male population in Denmark. When corrected for age, it was still 2.5 times higher. Somali citizens specifically had a conviction rate of 114 per 1,000 residents as compared to just 12 for Danish citizens. The financial cost intensified concern. In 2018, Denmark's Ministry of Finance reported that immigrants from non-Western countries and their children created a net cost of 31 billion Danish kroner in a single year. That's roughly 4.2 billion US dollars. By 2025, Danish officials publicly stated that the 40,000 Syrian refugees in Denmark had total incomes about €500 million, while associated public expenditure amounted to about $1.5 billion, a massive deficit for the nation. Housing made the impact impossible to ignore. Denmark already had one of Europe's most expensive housing markets. And a 2025 study found that over 60% of Denmark's housing price growth since 1999 could be directly attributed to immigration-driven population growth. In areas where the migrant population increased by just 1% over 5 years, their home prices jumped by 11% and rents rose by 6%. Denmark's response was systematic and it was uncompromising. In 2016, Denmark crossed a line few European countries were willing to approach. The government passed a law allowing police to confiscate cash and valuables from asylum seekers to help pay for their upkeep. Anything worth more than $1,500 could be taken. International media quickly branded it the jewelry law and condemned it as cruel and inhuman. Denmark did not even blink. They did not reverse course. Then in 2018, Denmark introduced the Ghetto Package, a sweeping set of measures targeting immigrant-heavy neighborhoods officially designated as ghettos. Now, these areas were placed under special legal rules. Crimes committed within them could carry double punishments compared to the same offenses elsewhere. But the most controversial element involved children. Under the new rules, children as young as 1 year old living in designated ghettos were required by law to attend mandatory daycare for 25 hours per week. And the stated goal was cultural integration. Toddlers were to be taught the Danish language and exposed to what authorities defined as Danish values, including celebrating Christmas traditions, democratic norms, and gender equality. Parents who refused to comply faced the loss of welfare benefits entirely. In effect, the state compelled families to place their youngest children into government-run cultural programs. But it's what came next that shocked the entire continent. Up until this point, the immigration crackdown was being led primarily by the so-called far-right Danish People's Party. But the new immigration crackdown is coming from a political corner no one, not even the Danes, expected. Do you know what the new thing is among the ultra-wealthy? Do you know where so many of them are putting their money these days? They're moving their funds into limited supply crypto assets that thrive during economic volatility. And so the simple question is here, gang, what are you waiting for? I mean, when are you going to bite the bullet and finally get into what many are calling the biggest wealth opportunity in human history? Well, if you're ready to take that step, meet your best new friend, Black Trust IRA, a groundbreaking government-approved crypto solution that's redrawing the map for generational wealth protection, letting you invest just like the rich elite. Their Animus AI platform has crushed the market, outperforming Bitcoin by over 250% since 2022, giving you the powerful tools needed to protect your future. Don't let the rich get richer while your savings dwindle away. Head to turleytalkscrypto.com right now and talk to a wealth protection expert. And when you open an account with them, you'll get a free $2,500 funding bonus to use right away. It's amazing stuff. Don't wait on this, gang. That's turleytalkscrypto.com to secure your family's future today. Meet Mette Frederiksen, Denmark's liberal prime minister, or at least she was supposed to be. A few years back, Frederiksen won Danish elections as the head of the center-left Social Democrats. But if European globalists thought that they would end the anti-immigrant crackdown, they were soon to be sorely mistaken. Back in 2019, Fredrickson actually campaigned by stealing the migration policies of the so-called far right. And as a result, she and her party won overwhelmingly. Her approval ratings climbed sharply, and the Danish People's Party saw its vote share collapse. The logic was simple. Voters no longer needed the so-called far right when mainstream parties were delivering on the same policies. Prime Minister Fredrickson stood before Parliament and said something that stunned the world. Denmark could not promise fewer asylum seekers. Denmark could only promise zero. Zero asylum seekers. Full stop. And it wasn't just talk. Today, Denmark has a rare cross-party consensus. Both left and right agree on minimizing refugee intake, enforcing strict integration, and preserving Danish culture. These positions are no longer controversial, not even remotely. And the results speak for themselves. Asylum applications fell from over 21,000 in 2015 to less than 300 in 2021. In 2024, Denmark granted refugee status to only 1,700 individuals, down from over 6,000 in 2014. Of the 99,000 residence permits awarded in the previous year, barely 800 were allocated to asylum seekers, less than 1%. Denmark's approach rests on brutal economic and cultural logic. From the Danish perspective, the crackdown on migration is essential for the sustainability of their unique welfare state. You can have borders or you can have a welfare state, but you can't have both. And as protectors of a distinctly Scandinavian social services model, even the Danish political left are slamming the door on migrants who are overwhelming that welfare system. In fact, Denmark became the first European country to pass legislation allowing asylum seekers to be transferred outside of the continent of Europe for processing to places like Rwanda. You see, that moment marked a clear turning point. Denmark was no longer an exception within Europe. It was actively shaping a new continental approach to migration, one centered on externalization, deterrence, and state control rather than automatic reception and integration. And now other countries are increasingly following Denmark's lead. In fact, even the European Union itself sealed a landmark deal this month in December to fast-track migrant returns, approving a new list of 7 safe countries to speed up deportation. Yes, even the bullies in Brussels are starting to bend the knee to the will of the people to restore European sovereignty. Denmark's transformation represents the purest distillation of what happens when a welfare state collides with mass immigration from incompatible cultures. It's the story of a society that attempted integration, judged it a colossal failure, and then pivoted dramatically in the opposite direction. Denmark made a deliberate choice. Its leaders, even on the political left, decided that the costs of an open society had become too high. Now Denmark is showing the rest of the Western world how far a democracy may go when its people feel threatened. The doors were open for decades. Now they're slammed shut, and the echo is being heard all across the entire continent. If you love seeing faith, family, and freedom winning again, you'll love Turley Clips. These are short, uplifting highlights from our show filled with stories of renewal, courage, and hope that prove a new conservative age is rising every single day. Subscribe to Turley Clips today and stay inspired, encouraged, and connected to a movement that's building a brighter future.